It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, Syria's new leaders say the West has nothing to fear. So what does that mean for the Syrians here who want to go home and for those who don't? Is there a risk of making hasty decisions about the safety of Syria, especially with thousands who fled the horror still navigating the UK asylum system? Tonight, we'll hear from a British Syrian doctor desperate to return in order to rebuild the country's healthcare system, and from the head of the Refugee Council. Also ahead tonight, the crisis in social care and how it's putting lives at risk. We speak to the brother of a vulnerable man left alone by his carer to wander the streets, and we ask what it says about the wider issues with the care system. Plus, with dementia still the biggest cause of death in the UK, experts urge the government to provide a proper plan for fighting the disease. And police fear former England rugby star Tom Voice was swept away by floods in the wake of the weekend's storm. All that to come, and much more on the UK Tonight. Good evening. The message from the rebel leader now in charge of Syria was clear. The West has nothing to fear from a new regime. Speaking to Western media for the first time since the fall of Bashar al-Assad's government, Abu Mohammed al-Jalani told Sky News there will be no return to panic and Syria is on the road to reconstruction and stability. Well, it was a message of hope for many of the Syrians who managed to escape al-Assad's despotic rule and claim asylum here in the UK. But for others, it's far too soon to know just how safe they will be if they choose or are forced to return. Shortly, I'll be joined in the studio by a Syrian doctor who has been living and working in the UK but is now desperate to go back. But first, our social affairs correspondent, Becky Johnson, has been speaking to an asylum seeker from Syria who wants to lead a new life here, but fears they may no longer have that chance.
We are in a very dark reality in Syria. Assad left Syria as a demolished country.
From his home in Manchester, Hassam has watched the downfall of a regime he says attacked him as a young human rights activist in Syria.
I have been targeted by barrel bombs, which caused me a serious injuries in my legs.
He fled first to Jordan, then Turkey, arriving in the UK with his wife and child on a student visa last year.
We applied for many visas as a students, and we granted a visa for the UK.
Within weeks of getting here, they claimed asylum, but 15 months on was still waiting for a decision when the government paused all applications from Syrians. Some people would say you fled Syria because of the Assad regime. That regime has now fallen. Why don't you go back?
It is not ended by Bashar al-Assad leaving Syria, because all the officers, all the soldiers, all the security officers that have been controlling the country, all the Ba'ath party who was controlling the party were still and still now fully functioned and fully armed. I don't think that they will just turn into a peaceful angels.
With his visa due to expire, his right to work and rent will end next month. And without an answer from the Home Office, he fears for his family.
I don't know if I was able to look at my kids' eye and tell them that we are homeless now.
The government estimates he's among around 6,500 Syrians waiting on asylum decisions, but has defended pausing claims.
People were claiming asylum from the Assad regime, which is no longer there. So that's why it's right, like France and Germany, for us to suspend those asylum decisions. But we also need to closely monitor what is happening in Syria, because there's so much instability. We don't know yet how that will play out.
The UK has taken in tens of thousands of Syrians since the civil war began, but their need for asylum here is now being questioned. Can you ever see a point where you would feel that you do want to return to Syria?
Yes, of course. If we have a free country where I freely can express my opinion, I will do my work, or I will do my best to get back to there.
But until then, with asylum applications halted, they and many others may not have the option of remaining in Britain. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Dr. Abdulkarim Ekzayez, a British Syrian doctor working here in the UK, but whose focus has been very much on the healthcare provision in Syria. Also joining us this evening remotely, Enver, the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council. Good evening and welcome to you both. Dr. Ekzayez, I'll come to you first, if I may. You left Syria for the final time back in 2016. First of all, what was your reaction to events on Sunday that took the world by surprise? And we've been reflecting the thoughts of the Syrian community since the events of Sunday. Be interested to get your view on what's happening, particularly given your profession and your links to Syria.
Yeah, well, I think the fall of Assad regime in Syria is nothing, short of historic. Although it was a big surprise for all of us, even maybe for the fighters themselves, they would not have expected this quick fall. But after 54 years of suppressive regime, starting from Hafez al-Assad in 1970, and then the 14 years of brutal violence, of chemical weapons, of detention, torture, now the fall of this regime brings a lot of joy and happiness that the dark phase of Syria has ended. And now we're looking to the future. Only 1 month ago, we were not able to be optimistic.
Well, this is something you probably weren't even contemplating.
Absolutely. Assad was controlling the majority of Syria. The 4 million population in northwest of Syria were having this little small areas as the last stronghold of oppositions with a lot of bombardments and airstrikes. And now all of a sudden, this deterrence of aggression and military operations started sweeping through the country from Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and then to Damascus, which was a big surprise for all of us. But I think this brings a lot of joy and happiness with some cautious optimism that, our challenges are ahead of us. There is a long way to rebuild this country, and this cautious optimism should guide us in the next phase.
Yeah, a long way ahead. Enver, just reflecting there with Dr. Ekzayez, that this seemed to happen overnight. It was such a rapid fall of the Assad regime. The UK government have described it as a fluid situation, but it does appear that decisions are being made about the future of Syria, and the word safety is used a lot. We know there was a pause on the Syrian asylum applications here in the UK. There's been early talk about people returning. Do you think it's too early to start talking about that yet with any sense of certainty?
I think it's absolutely premature. And I think, look, these are very early days. We've just heard there from Dr. Ekzayez that the situation remains very fluid, remains very unstable. Syrians themselves, as we've just heard, are unsure what might happen. And given those circumstances, I think it's premature and too soon to say that Syria is safe. And look, it's a fact of our refugee system that if someone comes here fleeing and they make an asylum claim, that we look at their case and we treat it fairly. We treat it with respect, and if they are found to be in need of protection, we give them safety. And let's remember that tens of thousands of Syrians have fled. Many have come to the UK, 20,000 by the former Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron. He agreed that 20,000 should be settled in the UK. They've gone on to set up their own businesses, to contribute to our communities. And that's something that we should recognise that refugees do when they're allowed to stay in our communities. They make an incredible contribution, but it's absolutely critical that if they come here fleeing persecution, we give them the right to have their case heard and we look at it on its merits.
Yeah, Enver, there has been a lot of talk about the fact that there are still, a huge number of Syrian asylum seekers in the current system at the moment. They haven't had their claims processed, their future is uncertain. And now there is this option potentially for the UK government to say that Syria is a safe country once again. People can return. There is, of course, the option for people to return voluntarily, but there has been talk of people being forced to return.
And I just think that, look, that would be wholly inappropriate. There's no indication yet from any of the evidence that Syria is safe. Indeed, the government, the organisation that's taking control of the government in the capital, Damascus is a proscribed terrorist organization by Western governments, including the British government. And I think that would suggest that Syria is far from safe and the situation is very fluid indeed. And given that situation, it would be premature and I think short-sighted of the government and wholly inappropriate to suggest that people should be returned. If someone voluntarily chooses to go back to Syria or the region, that is their individual choice. But it would not be right to start forcibly placing people on planes and sending them to a country when we don't know what the situation is, where it's utterly fluid and it's far from safe yet.
Yeah, Dr. Ekzayez, you're nodding along to that. And this does feel like a very rushed conversation, prompted by the nature of the speed of the fall of the Assad regime. As Enver Solomon pointed out there, the rebel group, HTS, could be removed from the UK's banned terror organisation list. But the government is saying it's too early to talk about that yet. But under those rules, the UK government isn't even allowed to speak to them, and they're about to form some kind of government. So when we talk about Syria being safe, you come at it from a medical humanitarian point of view. You want to go back to your country to help rebuild the healthcare system. What would it take for you to deem it safe to go back and do that?
Yeah, but first of all, I can't agree more with Mr. Solomon about this assessment as a premature decision to change any policy related to refugees. Even, it is, I think, a personal decision to go back voluntarily now. For me, as a British Syrian, because I do have the British citizenship, I can have the option of going back if things were not stable. So I am planning to go back to Syria, even as soon as next week. I'm planning to pay a visit and see how I can contribute. Because since I left Syria in 2016, so I worked as a neurosurgeon in field hospitals. I supported, the polio eradication, the chemical weapons response. And since I came here, most of my work was related to Syria. In Syria, we left homes, we left families, we left beloved ones, but we have not abandoned our commitment to our country. And most of our work here was really related to Syria. So I want to go back to contribute to the rebuilding of the country. But I think there are certain conditions that need to be met first. I think on the top of the list is safety and security. No one can guess now what comes next in terms of safety and security. There is always this possibility of a relapse in conflict and violence. Second is like infrastructure, basic services. The infrastructure is completely destroyed in the country with the recent Israeli airstrikes in the country is even, worsening the infrastructure. So we have a long way to go in terms of ensuring safety and security, rebuilding the infrastructure, institutions, and then thinking on how we can attract people to go back to contribute, especially the expertise in the diaspora.
Yeah, the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has been saying the right things, talking about respecting people's rights, protecting minorities, rebuilding a new Syria. But these are words at this stage. We'll wait for actions. And I know just as we draw to a close our conversation, you've got a message for Syrians watching. Yeah,
so a message to all my fellow Syrians. We went through a lot of sufferings over the last 14 years, but we showed significant, extraordinary resilience. I think our journey has not ended with the fall of Assad. We have a long way to go, and I think it is our opportunity now to contribute. And my message to the world that the international community has let us down many times over the last 14 years, after the chemical weapons, after the besiegement of Aleppo, of Eastern Ghouta. Now is the time to rectify. Please help us in this journey. We need to build our institutions, we need to ensure stability, and we need to build a better future for Syria, where my children and all Syrian children can go back, grow, and with hope, opportunities, and peace.
Dr. Abdulkarim Ekzayez, thank you so much. And Enver Solomon joining us remotely, Chief Executive at the Refugee Council. Council, thank you both for your contributions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, following the fall of Bashar al-Assad, thousands of people have been flocking from all over Syria to Damascus in the hope of finding loved ones detained by his regime. Sky's chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, has visited one hospital where desperate family members are looking through the morgues themselves, looking for answers and closure at last. We can watch Stuart's astonishing report on the world with Yalda Hakim. That follows us here on Sky News at 9 o'clock, or if you'd like to watch it at your leisure. I won't say now because you're watching us. You can scan the QR code on your screen. Now, imagine the concern of discovering a vulnerable relative missing. Well, that's exactly what happened to Ben and his brother Simon, who is autistic and cannot be left alone. Simon's council-appointed carer left him to wander the streets of London unsupervised. Sky's People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has been finding out what this story tells us about the state of social care in the UK.
Hang on. We're going to look right, hang on. Hang tight, we're going to cross here, hang on.
Is it stressful taking him out onto the street?
Yeah, it's all of the time.
Ben cannot take his eyes off his brother Simon for a minute. A simple walk down the street requires total concentration.
Oh, bigger brother? Yeah. That's all right, we're here. Simon is in his late 20s. He is autistic. He's not aware of danger. He's not aware of things that might harm him. Oh, no. Oh, see, he just goes in and out. There you go, hold that. Ooh.
Say hold that.
Hold that.
Say hold that.
So you can see in the last 10 to 12 minutes, so many different streets to go into, cars, ambulances, two ways. It's very easy for him to get lost and get into some troubles.
But that's exactly what happened after Ben entrusted Simon into the care of others. The very people who were meant to care for him failed him.
You approached the council for some care for Simon, didn't you?
Yeah.
What did they offer you?
The council, after many emails, finally came back to us in March of 2024, and they came with an interim package of 25 hours of care.
His local authority, Camden Council, contracted a care agency called Hartwig Care to provide a trained carer for Simon's very specific needs. In May this year, the carer took Simon out into town to a coffee shop on a busy high street. Ben reminds the carer to keep an eye on his brother while they're out.
There was a knock on the door, quite a frantic knock. So I go downstairs and I realize it's Simon. And he was sweating, he was just huffing and puffing, he was really upset. I texted the carer and I said, "Is everything okay?" He read it, but he didn't respond. It was another 30 minutes where he called me.
Ben decides to record the call. We've disguised the carer's voice.
Hello?
Hello, Ben.
Yeah.
I have an issue now.
What happened?
I went to Lou in the Starbucks. I asked him to sit down, I should wait for him, I'm coming. When I got out, I didn't see him. I've searched everywhere now.
You went to the bathroom, okay. He left?
Yes.
When he was lost, if you can see through his eyes, he would have noticed that no one was with him, and it was sensory overload. He's by himself, there's cars honking, there's high traffic, so he would have ran through. In that 12 to 15 minutes, anything could have happened.
The carer had gone to the toilet and left Simon on his own. Ben's worst nightmare.
This was really quite a serious thing.
Of course.
Your brother should not be left alone.
Right.
And here he has just wandered back through one of the busiest streets of London.
That's right.
A spokesperson for Hartwig Care told us, due to client confidentiality, it's our policy not to provide comments on specific incidents involving our service users. However, we want to emphasise that client safety is always paramount in our service provision.
This is essentially all the documents that we have.
But Hartwig Care knew how vulnerable Simon was. Camden Council's own social worker set it out in a report that Simon has no road safety awareness and is at risk of wandering into the road if left unsupervised.
It was there in black and white for everyone to see how important it was that he wasn't left alone.
Right.
That's not all. A medical report written by a consultant neurologist also came with a clear warning. It stated that due to his cognitive disability, autism and epilepsy, he is not able to be alone without supervision. We don't know if the carer that day had been told about these critical warnings. What we do know is that the quality of care fell so short that Simon's life could have been in danger.
The council and the social workers said she apologized. She said, "Oh, we're sorry, we'll have to do a safeguarding review." I said, "Okay, that's fine." And this is all in email. I said, "Please do the safeguarding review as soon as possible." She has been radio silent ever since.
Camden Council told us, "We would like to apologise to the resident and their family for the distress that this incident caused. Following this happening, we immediately began a safeguarding review with Hartwig to understand exactly what had happened and what they would do to ensure an incident like this does not happen in the future."
It kills germs. It's going to take about maybe 10 minutes. 7 minutes.
Camden Council has been open about the fact that demand for adult social care is so high, it hasn't got enough money to pay for it, and it's been forced to make cuts to services. Simon's carer, for example, was costing the council £750 per week.
How has this made you feel about the quality of care that was offered to you?
The quality of care did not match the price that they charge. It's all about money. And it just speaks to the greater issue about care in this country. Simon, leave the lunch here for you.
Social care is at breaking point. 81% of councils, including Camden, say they expect to overspend on their adult social care budgets this year, while half of home care providers say they simply can't meet demand. And complaints about adult social care have risen by a fifth since 2013. All of these pressures can affect the quality of care. I've come to Liverpool to the social care sector's annual conference, and those financial pressures are at the top of the agenda, especially with the government's latest plan to hike up national insurance contributions for employers. Council leaders here say it will cost them an extra £1.8 billion and cripple some companies and agencies that they use to provide care. The new Care Minister, Stephen Kinnock, is promising a new national care service, major reform, but he's facing a sceptical crowd.
It's truly heartbreaking that in the 21st century, people are not getting the service that they should, that health inequalities are worsening. But I'm not going to promise that change can be delivered overnight.
We asked the Minister for an interview, but we were told he didn't have time. But I wanted to put to him the concerns so many people have.
How worried are you that you have to sell to these people that national insurance is not going to cripple some of these care providers and drive down standards?
Well, as I pointed out...
You understand that concern, though?
As I pointed out in my speech and in the questions that I took afterwards, when we won the general election on the 4th of July, we inherited the worst fiscal environment since the Second World War. And so action had to be taken to get the public finances onto a stable footing.
This government doesn't have the money to pull off what you've just told those people, does it?
Look,
there is no money to match the ambition, is it? We're going to level with people.
We are fixing the finances. Until we fixed the public finances, we are not going to be in a position to invest properly in our public services, so we've got to take it one step at a time.
It is on everyone's lips. What is the time frame for this big plan of a national care service? It's what all these delegates want to know. It's what people who use the service want to know.
It's what Ben and Simon want to know.
Hang on, sir. Hang on. We're going to go that way. Come.
Because improving social care is vital to them in their lives right now. It's about avoiding cost-cutting, keeping Simon safe.
Your reaction to what you heard on the stage?
Unrealistic.
Right. OK. That doesn't sound too hopeful.
Melanie Williams is the president of the Association of Directors of Adult Social Care Services. These are the people who are in charge of care at councils.
I suppose the truth of the matter is that the government actually don't have the money to deliver what they say they want to deliver, do they?
No, they don't, and that's a big concern for us. So we know that adult social care reform is really expensive and is a long-term investment over time. But we do need to be able to make those small investments now to get there. And that's a big concern, that there's so many priorities for government to face that they won't be able to afford the changes.
How we doing, Simon? Everything good?
Everything terrific.
You know, I was worried about you last time. I was worried. Anything could have happened.
Listen, terrific, bigger better.
Yeah, I was really worried. I don't want that to happen again.
Okay.
Okay?
Ben's brother's case was investigated, but no one from Camden Council has told Ben what the conclusions were. And Camden Council told us that it wasn't published online because the incident wasn't serious enough. Ben says he's been kept in the dark.
You have got nothing back from any of these, certainly not the council, the agency, that goes anywhere close to explaining what happened to your brother.
No response at all. Just a ton of delays.
And in August, a lawyer representing the brothers free of charge submitted an official complaint to Camden Council. That complaint was rejected because the council said, the issues you have raised falls outside of our formal complaints process.
It just makes me upset that they're, not only Simon, but so many other people are not getting the right care. It gets to you, man. Like it really does. Okay, you're not happy, right?
I'm happy.
Okay, all right.
I'm happy.
Okay, it's all right. Some people might see this piece and say, well, that can't happen to me. You're only one family emergency away from being a carer, and until you're in it, you can't really relate to it. But once you're in it, you'll understand.
Ben is now caring for his brother full-time again. He says his faith in the system has been shaken so much that for now, they've opted to go it alone.
Well, Nick joins me now in the studio. And Nick, this is just part of your work that you've been doing, looking into this sector. We saw you just a couple of weeks ago talking about the fake carer, the imposter. This is yet another disturbing story from that sector. And just a week ago now, the Prime Minister stood up and set out his big milestones, his big targets for this new-ish government. And care wasn't one of them.
That's right. And we know that social care, the system that's designed to look after our most vulnerable, is firstly chronically underfunded, but it's also oversubscribed. There are too many people accessing the service. And we know that political parties for a long time now have promised to reform social care, but none of them up until now have been able to do it. Labour promised to do it, and yet last week when the Prime Minister stood up and delivered what he said were the big milestones, social care, as you just said, wasn't mentioned once. Now, I discussed this with the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, and asked him why that was the case.
We were clear with the country ahead of the election what Labour's missions for government were, and we were clear last week about what the milestones that people can judge us against will be by the end of this Parliament, including reducing NHS waiting times from 18 months, where they roughly are now, to the 18-week standard that we expect. Social care is part of the solution to the NHS crisis. Why didn't he mention it in the speech
last week? Such a big speech, wasn't it? Setting out some of the big commitments. You must have been a bit disappointed that social care didn't get one mention.
The Prime Minister and I were clear before the general election, as we've been clear since the general election, that there is no solution to the crisis in the NHS that doesn't involve solutions in social care too.
But it didn't warrant a mention. It's interesting, isn't it? Because the government perhaps aren't talking about it until you actually directly ask them about it, which is a bit of a worry given the state of the care service that you've been investigating, and that just seems to be the tip of the iceberg. As you said, it's oversubscribed, and as we get older, more of us living longer, more of us are going to need it.
The people I speak to in the care sector, they refer to themselves as the Cinderella sector, you know, forgotten about. The NHS has historically got, but potentially rightly so, the lion's share of the resources. And only this week, the government have announced measures to try and counteract the annual winter pressure crisis, to relieve pressure on hospitals. But the sort of elephant in the room here is one of the reasons why there's so much pressure on hospitals, so many people coming through the front door needing treatment, is that the back door is blocked because people are stuck in hospital beds for no clinical reason, because there's no care plan in place for them to be able to go safely home. That's a failing in social care connecting with the NHS. So when the government talk about reforming the NHS, they cannot do it without a reformed social care. Now, there are some massive pressures, Sarah-Jane, coming down the line in the next few months We discussed this the other week. The government's plan to hike up national insurance contributions for employers will mean costs will rise for care providers. And the National Care Association tonight told me that they worry that next year we could see more than 10,000 independent care providers collapse because of those pressures. And that reduction in services will mean demand will only grow, pressure will only grow and grow.
We had the Health Secretary saying there that he and the Prime Minister are committed as part of the NHS plan to look at this system and reform it. But we're not getting a timescale, are we? And that's what we need. We need some of those milestones, targets, for people to know that there is a firm commitment to improve things and improve things soon. There is no timescale.
There's the only timescale that we've got is that social care reform is within the 10-year plan. So that's a long way off. We know that social care is a here and now problem. People will be watching this now who are struggling to access social care for their loved ones. And the social care sector say that they understand that this is going to take a long time and they understand it's going to cost a lot of money, but it needs to be addressed very soon. And these pressures, as I say, are growing and growing. And social care, I'm afraid, cannot wait a decade. We are seeing an emerging crisis, which I think is going to get very, very pronounced in the new year, going into 2025. And it all goes back to people like Simon. Social care relies on quality of care. And when quality is reduced because of, for example, cost cutting, that's when people are put at risk.
OK, Nick, thank you. Nick Martin there with his report into the social care sector. We'll speak again. Nick, thank you. This does come here on the programme. We'll be discussing why dementia is the leading cause of death in the UK and it is devastating our health system.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, OK?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against, that the wind is the really big problems. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Now, just before the break, we were discussing the growing social care crisis. And new figures released today have revealed that, once again, dementia was the leading cause of death in the UK last year. It's a disease that will only continue to grow as the population continues to age. An estimated 944,000 people in the UK currently live with dementia. But but it's predicted that figure could rise to 1.4 million over the next 15 years. The disease already accounts for nearly a quarter of hospital beds for people over the age of 65. And dementia care costs the NHS more than £40 billion every single year, a number that is set to double by 2040. I'm joined now by Jennifer Keane, who is Head of Policy at the Alzheimer's Society. Jennifer, we've spoken before on this programme about the fact that dementia is, one of the biggest, in fact, the leading cause of death in the UK. Last year, that was confirmed, numbers going up. It's something we should have expected, given what we already knew, but the big question continues to be, what is being done about it?
Well, I think the answer to that question is that not enough is being done about that. So we're talking about the leading cause of death in the UK. It's responsible for 1 in 10 of all deaths that happen in this country. And yet we're not seeing the kind of action that we need. Dementia, historically and still today, has been under-prioritised. We've not seen the kind of funding that we need to see into research that means that we can understand the condition and can deal with it. But also, there's a number of things that we know that do make a difference, and we're not seeing those things happening either. So, for example, we know that an early diagnosis is really important to helping people to be able to manage the condition. And yet more than 1 in 3 people who have dementia today in the UK don't even have a diagnosis.
What do you think is behind the reluctance to treat it as a national health emergency, which, given those figures, it's hard to argue against it being labelled that? You look at other diseases that are treated as a priority on the NHS and, the statistics involved in dementia. It does deserve more attention. Why do you think it doesn't? It's an uncomfortable question to ask, but do you think it's to do with ageism? It can be seen as part and parcel of getting older.
Yeah, I think that is a part of it. I think for a long time, dementia has not been well understood. So people thought that dementia symptoms, people have just mistaken that for the normal kind of cognitive decline that you see as people get older. But of course, dementia is not normal. So it shouldn't be a normal part of ageing. It is a terminal condition of the brain. But I think because partly for that reason, it hasn't had the kind of focus that it needs. I think also part of the reason is that a lot of this kind of gets swept under the carpet. So those figures you were talking about before, about it's over £42 billion a year, the cost of dementia to the UK. A lot of that is actually shouldered by individuals and families. A lot of people who are caring for dementia, for people with dementia in their families at home. So this doesn't really get the kind of acknowledgement or the kind of focus that other conditions like cancer, for example, get.
Yeah, because there isn't the provision there. We were just talking about it before the break on this programme with our People in Politics correspondent Nick Martin about social care. There just isn't the quality and the numbers in the care sector to help those who need it, and particularly those families who have somebody, living with dementia. More than 48,000 women died with the condition last year, compared with 27,000 men. The fact that dementia is the leading cause of death in women since 2011, with that trend continuing last year, that isn't spoken about a lot, is it? The fact that it disproportionately affects women.
Yeah, absolutely. And people have thought in the past that, that could be a reason why it's under prioritised. We know that a lot of women's health issues do get under prioritised. We also know that a lot of the caring responsibilities for people with dementia are also taken on by women too. So there's a lot to think about here. But whatever the reason, you can't get away from the fact that dementia actually has a really devastating impact on the health and social care system. So we're seeing, as you said, you talked about the number of hospital beds that are taken up by somebody with dementia. And actually, we know that if we can get someone an early diagnosis, if we can get them the kind of treatment, and absolutely you talked about social care, if we can get them that kind of high quality social care that they need, then actually you can reduce all of these pressures, but you can reduce the huge devastating personal impact of it as well.
Yeah, it's about early diagnosis, isn't it? It's about appropriate and adequate care, because more people are finding that they can be diagnosed really early on. In fact, you can be sort of tested, you can talk about your family history with your GP. And when you talk about the NHS coming up with a longer term plan, what does that look like in your mind's eye? If, you know, if the Alzheimer's Society were to present a blueprint, if you like, of how to tackle this. I know research would be in there, but what else?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been talking about what we want to see in the long-term plan for the NHS. So, and actually the things that the government are talking about, what the transformation they want to make to the NHS, they're talking about getting care out of hospitals into the community. They're talking about prevention rather than sickness. And they're things that absolutely we would want to see for dementia. So, you know, we know that dementia is a condition that should actually be managed in the community. You would want to go to your GP to get referred for a diagnosis. And then with the right kind of support in the community, you should be able to stay at home for longer. We also want to make sure that if you can get that kind of early diagnosis and treatment, that can slow down the progression of symptoms, which helps people to stay well for longer. So a lot of the things that the government are talking about having in the 10-year plan, we think they should apply to dementia too. The challenge is that, you know, at Alzheimer's Society, we talk about dementia being the biggest health and social care challenge that we face in this country. And so actually, you can't have a plan for the NHS without also having a plan for dementia.
Jennifer Keane, really good to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much for coming onto the programme. That's Jennifer Keane, their Head of Policy at the Alzheimer's Society, reacting to the new statistics out today that dementia was the leading cause of death in the UK last year. Still to come on the UK Tonight. Police say former England rugby star Tom Boyce is believed to have died after being swept away in floods caused by Storm Dara. Hello, welcome back. Now, Northumberland police say that the former England rugby player Tom Voice is believed to have died after his car was swept away in a river on Sunday following heavy rain brought about by Storm Dara. Our correspondent Amelia Harper has been following this story today and joins me now with what details we know, Amelia, which at this stage is not very much.
It's not a lot. What police have set out is that they fear that Tom Voice died after going missing in an area of Northumberland that was impacted by flooding during Storm Dara. Now, for those who may not be familiar with Tom Voice, he's 43. He won 9 caps for England before retiring in 2013. He also played club-level rugby with London Wasps, Bath and Gloucester. Now, what police are saying has happened, Northumbria police started searching on Sunday lunchtime after he failed to come back home after an evening with friends. And what they think happened is they think he tried to drive over Aberwick Ford. Now, this is a shallow area where pedestrians and cars can cross the river Alne in Alnwick, and they think that his car was pulled along in the river's current. They have recovered the car, but they sadly have not found him. And what they fear has happened is that as he was trying to escape the car, he may have himself been swept away. We've had a little bit more detail, as you say, it is still sparse from Northumbria Police, from Chief Superintendent Helena Barron, who said it's an extremely tragic incident and our thoughts are very much with Tom's loved ones at this time. They've asked to support his family and that their privacy is respected. They have said extensive inquiries have been ongoing since concerns were raised for Tom, including deploying specialist teams to search for him. That included dog teams, drones as well, but they have said that the conditions around the river have made things very difficult, but they will continue to search, but it seems that Storm Dara has created a difficult search and rescue environment for them, but they will continue to pursue any leads they can.
OK, Amelia, thank you. Keep us updated. Amelia Harper there. Coming up on the UK tonight, Mo Salah helps Liverpool maintain their 100% record in this season's Champions League. And Ruffier, the racehorse, on the run in Scotland. We'll be speaking to his trainer after his day out on the town.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, and yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks, but taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
We're seeing an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there.
This is much more like a normal town.
It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news.
We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast. It's starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Hello, welcome back. Still to come, Rafael the racehorse's post-race adventure. We'll be speaking to his trainer. But first, David is here with a look at the rest of the day's sport. Did you see this runaway horse earlier on?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, just stick around.
I shall.
Stick around. I thought Sky Sports News would have been all over that. We're talking about the Champions League. It is back as our Liverpool once again needed a little bit of magic from Mo.
That's right, yeah. Mo Salah, he scored 16 goals now in the competition in the Champions League this season. Liverpool got 6 wins from 6. They're top of the Champions League table. It's expanded competition, that after a 1-0 win against Girona. And we'll show you the goal, actually, because it was Luis Diaz who was upended by, actually, Manchester United midfielder Donny van der Beek, and then a penalty wasn't originally given, but then went to the pitch like Bonneter, referee changed his mind, and this is Mo Salah scoring his 50th goal in the Champions League. In fact, that was enough for Liverpool to win away in Catalonia. So, as I say, 6 wins from 6, virtually assured a place in the last 16. Definitely got a playoff spot in any case. And the other notable thing about this game, by the way, Alisson, the keeper making his comeback, he was out for 11 games with an injury, was actually quite busy in that first half, but in the end, yeah, did his job. Liverpool 1-0 winners away at Girona.
All good for Liverpool in the Champions League. What about in the league in the run-up to Christmas? How's it looking for them?
Yeah, actually relatively straightforward. Listen, we know it's competitive.
Famous loss. You've just jinxed it.
I have a little bit. Sorry, Liverpool fans. But the one big-name team they do face before the end of the year is Tottenham. But around that, Fulham, Southampton, Leicester and West Ham to close out the calendar year. I'll tell you what, Arne Slot would absolutely take that. They're 4 points clear with a game in hand. So that is a relatively gentle run before they take on Manchester United in early January.
We've recorded that. We'll play that back to you in January, shall we?
Just also to mention, by the way, Celtic were playing Dinamo Zagreb away from home. 0-0 draw for Brendan Rodgers' side. Another valuable point for them. 4 games unbeaten in Europe's top club competition for the first time since 1986. They're looking good for a playoff spot. And in fact, there are other British teams in action tonight as well.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I think it's a human quality that some people are destined with their own determination.
I think that the player, compared to me, I think that they have much more responsibility.
I do think there's a responsibility within the game to prepare the lads for how hard it's going to be.
I started my investigation into academy football by finding out how the game's top managers get the best out of the young players. But only 9% of our academy players will ever play a professional game. Coming up in this episode, we find out how the best become the best.
You don't just get it handed to you, you're aware.
There has to be a fallback.
Chelsea Academy, that's all I've known.
Mentally, I think I've always been quite strong.
In the history of the game, almost 1,300 people have had the ultimate honour of wearing an England shirt. They climbed the mountain, made it to the very top. So what does that journey look like? The journey to become an elite footballer.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, residents of Prestonpans in Scotland were left rather startled yesterday after spotting a racehorse galloping down the high street. Rafael the racehorse had been competing in the 3:15 at Musselburgh, more than 2 miles away. He unseated his jockey during the race, jumped the fences out of the racecourse and trotted all the way to the nearby town. Staff did manage to track him down. He was 100-1, apparently, and he is now safely back home in his stables. Apparently, they caught him when he stopped at the traffic lights. Well, Rafael's trainer, Gary Rutherford, is here. I mean, that was a handy bit of training you gave the horse to stop at lights so he could be caught. You weren't actually at the race, but you got a rather panicked phone call, I understand.
Yeah, I was away to Newcastle. We had a runner down there, so I was kind of unaware of what was going on, and I got a phone call to say that Lucy had been unseated. And I never thought much about it. And then about an hour later, someone says, "Oh, he's been loose and he's galloped 3 miles away from the racecourse." So it's pretty unusual. I've never really heard of this happening before. So. But
that's the horse's temperament. He's clearly got a sense of adventure.
Yeah. He's quite headstrong at home, and Lucy that owns him and was riding him, she does a good job kind of keeping him calm, and yeah, he's not the easiest. It's probably a bit unfortunate that he got loose from the racecourse, but luckily he's back home and he's stable, and he's none the worse for his adventure.
Yeah, he's not the easiest. I mean, that's an understatement. But fortunately, he's OK. And how is jockey Lucy Brown? Obviously, she's in the middle of a race. Ruffio decides that he's had enough, unseats her, and off he pops. Is she OK?
Yeah, no, Lucy's she's fine today. I think she was a bit shocked. You know, she wasn't expecting him to get loose, so it was a bit of a fright for her. And he's kind of a family horse, you know. So her sister and her mum were there, and they were involved. So I'm sure they were pretty worried about the whole situation. But luckily, they caught him, and he's home safe.
Oh well, listen, he's safe. What's the future for him in racing? Because, you know, he didn't complete that race, but he did get 2 miles into town.
Yeah,
you know, once he's got the focus, he can go the distance, it seems.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back on the racecourse soon, and you know, hopefully Lucy stays on board, and hopefully can win a few races this season.
OK, well, look, he's going to be a name to watch out for in the future at the racetrack, isn't he? People are going to remember this story. Is this going to work in your favour, do you think?
Hopefully we get a few more horses. We could do with a couple of more nice horses to train. So hopefully it gets us a few more owners.
Oh, well, look, I'm glad that Lucy the jockey and the horse is OK. That is the runaway horse. I know a lot of passers-by who filmed it found it very amusing, but we are glad that everybody was OK. Gary, thank you so much for talking to us. That's Gary Rutherford there, the horse's trainer. Right, we're just going to take a quick look at the weather. High pressure keeping things fairly settled this week, if cold, but for some there'll be a lot of cloud around. Largely dry this evening with fog in places, but cloud across the blustery south will give some drizzly outbreaks. The southeast of England, that's going to stay damp overnight, but most other places are looking dry. Clear skies in the north and west will bring a sharp frost, with freezing fog patches becoming more widespread. Well, that's it from the UK tonight. We're back tomorrow night at 8. Matt Barbette will be here.